Every game follows a structure, that is, how the game devs intend exactly for the player base to experience their games. At least for the general audience. Certain genres of games require their own unique ways to progress through the game, whether it be completing specific tasks.
There's more?
Try catching 10 of those chickens.
Seriously?
Oh my god.
Moving from point A to point B, or just fighting everything until there's nothing left to punch. That brings us to the genre we will be looking at today, which is the open world genre. And since we talk about gacha games here, let us have a look at how Genshin Impact presents itself as an open world game. Do be warned that this video will contain spoilers up until the Netland region. Genshin is primarily a story-driven game, with an overarching goal of exploring every corner of the land of Teyvat, and reuniting with your sibling at the end of your journey. So you start at Mondstadt, not knowing much about the world you landed on, but quickly manage to get along with the folks, to the point where you even manage to help the leader of the nation solve a national crisis. In no time at all, we immediately land ourselves in a big conspiracy that is currently undergoing across the entirety of Teyvat, but weren't given much details besides go to the next nation, only to immediately land ourselves in another national crisis, where we soon learn about the supposed evil organization's plan for each nation, and a clear direction on what we will be doing for the rest of the story.
Listen to me, Lumine. I have already traveled through this world once. Once you reach the end of your journey as I did, you will see for yourself the true nature of this world.
Now where do we go from there? As a live service game, back then, most of the land of Teyvat is not made yet, outside of the first two, so realistically, your experience as an old player can feel somewhat linear. When we got to the third nation, Inazuma, your open world experience at the time will boil down to the new map. It wasn't until Sumeru came out on 3.0 patch that we actually got an optional path to take after Liyue, instead of proceeding towards Inazuma as required by the main story. In fact, all the areas released after Sumeru are completely accessible to a new player after they pass through the first two nations. Which leads us to the problem we have today. The story structure of Genshin is inherently clashing with the freedom of an open world game. While as an open world game, you are given the freedom of choice to go wherever you want in a vast map, with each part being significantly distinct from one another, but the main story forces you to go about it in a linear fashion, which I think is an absolute shame. And this has been an ongoing problem for newer players.
But I have to complete the Kazuha quest, and the Kazuha quest requires that I get an NPC out of the Ayato quest, and the Ayato quest needed me to get out of Goro's hangout, so I canceled Goro's hangout, but then there was another NPC in Ayato's quest that I had to get to, and then after that, I started doing Ayato's quest, but I still couldn't get far enough to be able to even start Kazuha's quest, so that way I could do Scaramouche's quest, so I could catch up with 3.4, so I could start the Dainzip Kaya quest in 3.5. It's a laundry list of things that I need to do before I can actually get to the new quest.
Of course, this applies to most live service games, but I would argue here today that Genshin may already have a solution to turn things around for the new player experience, just like the solution I have to finally fixing my shitty upload schedule. See, following the death of my laptop after making it run games way above its weight class, For the last few months, I was busy building something new, something more beautiful, and something more capable of running high-end games no matter what future gachas throw at me. And I am happy to announce that with this beast of a rig, I will be live streaming on YouTube every weekend. So do drop by and we can talk about anything gacha game related. Now let us return to how Genshin may have solved their player retention crisis. See, during the 4th year anniversary livestream, there is a boatload of quality of life updates added to the game during the launch of the new region Netland. But the update that caught my attention the most, and the whole reason I'm even making this video in the first place, is the ability to start Netland straight from Liyue. While this probably seems like a hasty decision made to attract more new players, because let's be real, most story-based live service games have this problem. At first glance, it would seem like a bad idea to skip from chapter 2 all the way to chapter 6 of a story. That is, until I did Fontaine. While Sumeru cleaned up the mess left behind by Inazuma and was able to write an actual good story since the game's launch, it also inadvertently tied Sumeru with Inazuma chronologically wise. Fontaine, however, doesn't have this problem. There are no reoccurring Fatui members from Sumeru, not even a mention. Forbidden knowledge, nor the Vision Hunt decree was ever brought up, and yet most of the community can firmly say Fontaine has a phenomenal main story. The inclusion of Child Tartaglia made Liyue the only prerequisite, which is the same as Netland, making it easily digestible story-wise for new players without going through Inazuma or Sumeru. That is to say, they don't seem to fully commit to doing this, but they are usually small mistakes that can be moved around. But believe me when I say, if they really wanted to make the story completely linear and chronological wise, they would have done a lot harder with referencing past stories. Looking at HSR for example. With all that said, the real interesting question will be how they handle the 7th region in Teyvat, Snezhnaya, home base of the Fatui, and seemingly what all the 6 regions have been building up towards. By all means, this is the one story that shouldn't be accessible to new players. But what if there is an interesting way that might be able to give new players a sneak peek into Snezhnaya? Do not all of these are just copious speculations on how they handle quick start with Snezhnaya Archon quest next year. If we look back at the first 2 acts of Sumeru, did any of it needed the completion of Inazuma? It wasn't until Act 3 where we meet a reoccurring character from the previous region, but other than that, Act 1 and Act 2 of Sumeru managed to properly introduce the themes and stakes of the region is facing through self-contained incidents that we resolve within the first 2 acts. This writing structure carried towards Fontaine, where we managed to resolve a smaller scale crisis that serves as an introduction to a greater threat that the region is facing. Going back to my point of giving new players a sneak peek to Snezhnaya, if they do it like Sumeru, where they don't bring up plot threads from previous regions in the first 2 acts, but instead have us do a story arc that shows us the themes of the region, then proceeding to lock them out of the remaining acts until they do all the prerequisite Archon quests from previous regions, this is one way of encouraging all the new players to do the rest of the game. Now let's look over at Dane's quest. Honestly, most of this takes place in random places of the map with no special ties to the region, no question about it, and they aren't really tied to the regional Archon quests either, except at the beginning, where Dane talks about major plot threads as an introduction, and only recently where we get a direct name drop regarding characters we just learned about from Fontaine. The break-off point after Liyue, where you get to choose between Inazuma or all other regions, should still be where you meet your sibling for the first time. But other than that, Dane's quest works independently regardless of which order you do the Archon quests in. And with that said, this is a fun way of looking at how the game can be handled in and updated in hindsight, with how different a new player experiences the game when all the regions are out. But we can only hope the devs had this in mind when they introduced the quick start feature, and that will have to do it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm hoping to see you in my live streams on the weekends. I'll see you on the next gacha game related video.